Hi there. Thanks so much for joining us for Face the State. I'm Tracy Townsend. We start today with a big development in one of the biggest murder cases in our state. We're talking about the Pike County massacre. George Wagner IV is behind bars this morning after a jury found him guilty on 22 charges, including 8 counts of aggravated murder, conspiracy, 4 counts of aggravated burglary, and 3 counts of tampering with evidence. Those charges are connected to the deaths of 8 Roden family members who were murdered execution style in Pike County in 2016. Governor Mike DeWine was the Ohio Attorney General at that time when those murders took place. After the verdict came down, he thanked the jurors and investigators and said that while the verdict doesn't bring closure, it should give the victims' families some sense of comfort.
But today, the Roden and the Gilley families can take some comfort in knowing that George Wagner has been convicted and that he will be punished, as will his brother Jake and his mother Angela. I want to thank the jury. It made a great sacrifice. This has certainly been one of the longest, if not the longest, trials in Ohio history. They hung in there, they did their job, they did their civic duty, and we're grateful for their work.
The governor has previously met with members of the Roden family. His office received more than 1,000 tips and conducted some 500 interviews. His team also traveled to 10 states, serving hundreds of subpoenas and search warrants. Now, the judge says that he hopes to sentence George Wagner IV between December 14th and December 23rd. We will certainly let you know when that date is set.
The bill, as amended, has passed.
Lawmakers reached across the aisle to change the game for millions of couples. The Senate voted to federally protect same-sex marriage. And while some say it's a step in the right direction, an American civil rights activist with ties to our state says it's not enough. 10 TV's Bryant Somerville explains.
I'm happy that at least something has been done, something that we will have to fall back on should the Supreme Court overturn Obergefell in the future.
Jim Obergefell, one of the most visible figures in marriage equality from Cincinnati, who had a major role in 2015's Supreme Court decision allowing same-sex marriage nationally, says despite passing in the Senate, he still has concerns regarding the Respect for Marriage Act.
I find it curious that it's called the Respect for Marriage Act because this act does not respect the LGBTQ plus community, our marriages, our relationships, or our families.
If passed, the measure would not force any state to allow same-sex couples to marry. It would, however, require states to recognize and protect same-sex marriages if Obergefell versus Hodges were to be overturned by the Supreme Court. It's a concern that has been growing since the court's June decision to overturn Roe v. Wade.
But this is not respect for marriage. This would take us back to a time where we are once again second-class citizens who are given something that isn't marriage, isn't respected and protected, and offered equally to every person in this country.
He says because there are religious exceptions, something Republican supporters wanted to protect religious organizations from having to perform same-sex marriages, the act does not tolerate religious beliefs in general.
This is about one specific group of people who believe their interpretation of their religion is more important than any other and more important than human beings in the public sphere. That is not tolerance.
Bryant Somerville, 10 TV News.
Both of Ohio's senators voted in favor of the Respect for Marriage Act, Senator Rob Portman being one of the 12 Republicans who voted yes. He had this to say after the vote.
The final vote was 61 to 36. That's a pretty powerful vote, when you think about it. So we now fire it like a torpedo back at the House, along with religious liberty protections that, frankly, nobody on my side of the aisle would have imagined that we could have accomplished. So for those Republicans, I think 46 of them who voted yes last time, now they have additional protections that many of them wanted the first time around with regard to religious liberty.
The legislation now goes to the House for approval before potentially finding its way to President Biden's desk. Also happening in the U.S. Senate this week, Kroger had to defend its proposed merger with Albertsons. Lawmakers are concerned about monopolies if the nation's two largest grocery store chains combine. In October, Kroger, the largest supermarket chain, agreed to acquire number 2 Albertsons in a deal it says would help it compete better against rivals.
This merger will give us the flexibility, national footprint, and digital capabilities to compete more effectively. Our commitment is to provide fresh, affordable food for everyone.
Our philosophy is locally great, nationally strong. The best way to compete with mega stores like Walmart and highly capitalized online companies like Amazon will be through a merger with Kroger.
But the union representing more than 1 million grocery store workers argues the merger is a bad deal for employees and consumers. Kroger owns 2,700 stores in 25 states operating under the Kroger brand. Albertsons operates 2,200 stores in 34 states among its 20 brands. Combining the two would create the nation's second largest food retail business behind Walmart, which currently owns about 22% of food retail sales. The merger is subject to federal approval. If allowed, it would take effect in 2024. Both CEOs who testified promised the company would spend billions to improve and upgrade stores, lower prices, and boost wages. Right now, the search is on for a new president of The Ohio State University. President Christina Johnson announced this week that this year would be her last. The university won't say why she's leaving, and Johnson released a statement only saying it was, quote, a difficult decision. During her term, the university's ranking rose from 53rd to 49th among universities. Johnson is also credited with helping convince Intel to make Ohio home. When asked who he thinks should be the next Ohio State president, Governor Mike DeWine declined to name names, but said it has to be someone who understands the university and Ohio. Here's what he had to say about Johnson's decision to resign.
We've worked on a number of things that benefit not just Ohio State, but benefit the entire state. An example would be the education and job training component in regard to Intel coming in. Ohio State's a major player in that. Dr. Johnson played a major role in that.
We are closely following what's next for The Ohio State University. We'll certainly keep you updated right here on 10 TV and on 10tv.com. A controversial bill at the Ohio State House is on hold, while lawmakers are pumping the brakes on a bill to ban gender-affirming surgeries. Plus,
this day, as Representative Seitz rightly said, means that the other victims in Ohio will be treated equitably the same way that survivors of Boy Scouts abuse in other states in the country will be treated.
It was a major step in the race to the finish line for Boy Scout abuse survivors in our state. We'll break down a critical piece of legislation that's moving forward. It was a busy week at the State House as lawmakers took up several bills during the lame duck session. We're going to highlight just a few over the next few minutes. We'll start with Senate Bill 357. State Senator Matt Dolan introduced it. The goal is to keep guns out of the hands of those who could be dangerous to themselves or to others. But in Ohio, passing any new gun restrictions could be an uphill battle. 10 TV's Brittany Bailey reports.
I always have a lot of hope. I'm an eternal optimist. I survived 12 bullets.
Those 12 bullets could not kill Whitney Austin or her hope. But that's not to say things did not look grim on that September day in Cincinnati back in 2018.
I thought I was walking into work at Fifth Third Bank to do my job, and instead I walked into a mass shooting.
Austin would survive. 3 others would not. Her life was changed forever.
I survived 12 bullets, and that was the message I needed to start Whitney strong and to do what I could to prevent gun violence.
You may remember that mission brought her to Columbus roughly 1 year after her shooting and just months after the Dayton mass shooting.
It takes my breath away nearly every time I think about this.
She spoke at the big rollout of the Strong Ohio bill that was introduced with much fanfare but led nowhere.
It was really hard. I've had a lot of really difficult moments in this fight as we work to bring people, to bring them into the work, but nothing will ever be as difficult as what happened on September 6th. So I just pick myself up and go again. My name is Whitney Austin.
That's why she was back in Ohio on Tuesday to once again push for stronger laws against gun violence. This hearing was for Senate Bill 357, which would call for behavioral health assessments for those who could be a risk to themselves or others. It would bar those deemed a risk from buying future weapons, but not remove the ones they already have. State Senator Matt Dolan is the sponsor.
That if we can isolate that behavior, then my bill is simply saying, let's make sure that person doesn't get a gun. I mean, it's pretty simple. We don't want suicidal or homicidal people to have access to firearms.
Well, this was just the second hearing for the bill, but Governor DeWine is on board.
If we're going to stop these horrible tragedies in Columbus and across the state where you see a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old who gets shot by someone who has no business having a gun. They've already been told that they cannot have a gun because they've been convicted of a violent offense. We need to throw the book at them, and that's what our bill will do.
And for Austin, whose hope springs eternal, this is just another step in a battle she's determined to win.
So yeah, there are hard days and I have to pick myself up again, but I have proof, I have evidence that we can do more. So keep pushing.
And again, that was Brittany Bailey reporting. This week's hearing was just for supporters. There will be a future hearing for opponents of that legislation. This week, the Ohio House passed a bill that would make swatting calls a felony. The prank takes valuable police resources away from where they're really needed. Under House Bill 462, those convicted could face prison time, fines, and restitution. The money would be used to reimburse law enforcement for abusing emergency services. The bill still has to be discussed in the Senate. Also at the State House this week, lawmakers made a few changes to a bill that would change voting laws in our state. One amendment put back a provision that had been removed, allowing the Secretary of State to send unsolicited absentee ballot applications to voters. Here's a closer look at House Bill 294. It would end early voting early and shorten the amount of time absentee ballots are available. It also proposes increased security at drop boxes and a ban on August special elections. And finally, it would require IDs to indicate when a person is not a U.S. citizen. The bill is going back to committee for testimony this coming week. And a new push for a $15 minimum wage was just introduced in the Ohio House. House Bill 69 would phase in increases to reach $15 an hour by the year 2027. A constitutional amendment does require the minimum wage to match inflation, but sponsors say it's not enough.
This opportunity to pass a bill to move us to $15 minimum wage is a step forward in making sure that every family has at least a starting point to have one job that can help them pay all of the necessities for them and their families.
Without House Bill 69, the minimum wage will rise to $10.10 per hour next year. And now we go to a major step in that race to the finish line for Boy Scout abuse survivors here in our state. The Ohio House voted this week on the Scouts Honor Bill. It affects how much money abuse survivors here in our state can get from that major bankruptcy settlement. This is a bill that is on a strict timeline, and getting it passed this week was crucial. The Scouts Honor Bill started as House Bill 709, but was then rolled into Senate Bill 199. Representative Jessica Miranda, who's a Democrat, sponsored the original bill along with Republican Representative Bill Seitz. This bill would remove the statute of limitations for any civil action claim against a bankruptcy estate for childhood sexual abuse. But that is as far as it would go. The bill has a very narrow focus. For Representative Seitz, that was by design. For survivors, it doesn't go far enough.
I think where I see Representative Seitz falling short in his view on this is acknowledging that victims of child sex abuse take sometimes decades before they come forward. And a state like Ohio that limits significantly the statute of limitations really is doing an injustice to to tens of thousands of individuals in Ohio who were victims of sexual abuse.
Specifically, it's good for those people that claim to have been victims of sexual abuse by Boy Scout troop masters, Cub masters, etc., and it enables them to recover to the fullest possible extent from the multi-billion-dollar settlement that the Boy Scouts have voluntarily entered into.
That bill would now go to the Senate for a vote. If it passes there, it then moves on to the governor's desk. This week, the Ohio Senate took up a bill aimed at making prescriptions a little more affordable for people who need them most. House Bill 134 would ban health insurance cost sharing. That means patients can use coupons and charities to help meet the cost of their deductible without insurance companies raising the ceiling, something that many people who suffer from chronic pain fully support. Insurance companies argue that the bill would actually make drugs less affordable by raising insurance costs, but lawmakers push back on that idea.
I mean, isn't the best way to control costs for you to control your own cost pressures?
So in a perfect world, yes, we would see that the rebates and the discounts get passed to patients and that lower list prices would help patients, but right now that isn't happening.
The bipartisan bill has already passed in the House. Right now, House Bill 454 is on hold at the State House. The bill would require minors who want to transition from their assigned gender to wait 2 weeks in order for a doctor to diagnose puberty blockers. Republican leadership said some of the medical information was unclear or conflicting. Representative Gary Click, who's sponsoring the bill, told us passing it during the lame duck session would be rushing it. $57 million is going toward safety in Ohio schools. We'll explain who's getting extra cash flow and what that money can do. Ohio schools are getting a major financial boost, $57 million aimed at improving safety for students. Many Central Ohio schools will get a cut of that cash. 10 TV's Lindsay Mills found out how that money is being used in the state's largest school district and what the future holds for districts that didn't make the cut.
Automatic locks, badge systems, and surveillance cameras. Grants totaling more than $57 million will step up security at schools statewide. In a third round announced this week, a dozen Gahanna-Jefferson schools will split more than $1 million. 20 Hilliard schools will split $269,000. More than 700 schools statewide are getting money this time around to improve building security. Columbus City Schools received funding in the second round announced last summer. And according to the district, the nearly $943,000 will be used to complete surveillance camera system upgrades at 19 CCS schools. It's part of Governor Mike DeWine's school safety grant program.
Every school is going to get the money that they need to be brought up to speed, at least as far as the physical plant itself is concerned.
The legislature set aside $100 million for the program, and DeWine says he'll push for more funding in the pipeline.
What I said at the time is that if that money was not enough, we'll go back to the legislature. And so we're now talking to the legislature about additional money.
Meantime, Groveport-Madison schools announced a major plan to step up security within the district. According to district administrators, it's not known yet if the plan will be funded by that grant money received from the state. The district is looking at adding metal detectors and more security and mental health support staff. It will be up to the school board to decide. A two-day meeting of experts focused on increasing strategies to reduce infant mortality in our state wrapped up this weekend. The Ohio Collaborative to Prevent Infant Mortality hosted the 2022 Ohio Infant Mortality Summit, Mobilizing Communities, Keeping Ohio Babies Safe Summit on Friday and Saturday at Columbus State Community College. It's the first gathering since before the pandemic. Friday's session was in person. Leaders from statewide organizations worked together to find ways to solve preventable baby deaths. Celebrate One executive director Maureen Stapleton told me this is not an Ohio problem, but a national one.
We've seen the PSAs, we've seen the commercials about putting baby to sleep on his or her back. What's happening?
The ABCs of safe sleep, everybody knows. Alone, on your back, and in a crib. What I think we're finding is the stressors of this of life, the pandemic. We're seeing some interesting correlations between drug use and infant mortality. We're trying to figure those out. But ultimately, I think it's moms and dads and family not having the skills to put a baby down and get a baby calm enough to go to sleep. And so you make the mistake of then, because the baby won't stop crying, putting the baby on the couch, which is absolutely inappropriate because it's a soft surface. Or you put the baby in the bed with you because you can't get the baby to sleep any other way.
Stapleton says they are seeing disparities in racial groups. Those are the categories that you'll find listed by the federal government, and that's what they're using. Celebrate One has an up-to-date dashboard you can check out, and you can find that at their website. Ohio is making strides to help people who suffer from addiction and mental health disorders. The governor announced this week that he's asking for support in these 3 areas: growing the behavioral health workforce, improving mental health research, and giving Ohioans better access to mental health care.
If we do not act, the bottom line is this: Ohioans with untreated addiction and mental illness will remain underemployed and unemployed. And so much potential for people, for families, for our great state will be lost.
Okay, here are some of the solutions the governor proposed. First, he wants to invest $85 million to turn unpaid internships in behavioral health into paid opportunities. He's asking the General Assembly to support several studies and build a new research center. Finally, he wants to expand mental health services statewide. DeWine made that announcement at the Ohio Chamber of Commerce's first healthcare summit on Wednesday. Organizers say it's going to be an event that would bring together lawmakers, business leaders, and healthcare experts so that they could talk about access and affordability of care. Chamber President Steve Stivers told me that he believes the coming issue is going to be healthcare, medical inflation, and how we manage it.
And I just want to ask you, in the context of your life on Capitol Hill, how has that prepared you to take the chamber in this direction?
Well, the things I learned on Capitol Hill, number one, is to focus on the issues that matter right now, and but also to lead into the future. And that's what we're trying to do at the chamber. We're paying attention to the things people are telling us today. The number one thing we hear from our members is about workforce. We hear about inflation and supply chain, but the coming issue, in my opinion, is going to be healthcare, medical inflation, and how we manage those things. As I see all these new contracts being negotiated between the health insurance companies and the hospitals, the providers, you're seeing big increases. And I think people are going to see double-digit increases in their healthcare premiums next year. And it's going to make healthcare an increasing topic of conversation. That's why we're trying to lead into that with a conversation at the end of this year as we get into next year.
Organizers say the conversation is critical and could focus on a healthcare redesign and some strategies to lower healthcare costs. We'll continue to follow that for you. This week, 20 new members were inducted into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame. The inductees span 15 Ohio counties and 4 major branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. We talked with one veteran about what it means to serve our country.
And I think it's important that the country understand that our military is made up of normal people and not made up of professional. I was a professional soldier. 29 years in the military makes you a professional soldier, and yet I think that I perform well in the community also.
The veterans inducted were chosen from 87 nominations. They join 934 Ohio veterans who have been inducted. We thank you so much for joining us today for Face the State, and we wish you a great week.